Thanks for joining us here on the channel. We're back with another interview, and Adam F. Lee is here from Community Trail Running. Adam, thanks for joining us again.
Thanks for having me, Eric.
I spoke to you a while ago when Community Trail Running, which is a podcast, was just a baby, brand new, about a year ago. You're up to 90 episodes now. How did that happen?
Your guess is as good as mine. People just kept saying yes to coming on, and it's just sort of grown naturally from there. The fun thing is now, too, with a little bit of momentum, I have people reaching out and saying, "Hey, you should cover so and so," or "Can I introduce you to so and so," or "You should get this person on." So that's been really fun too to be able to feature folks that other people want to hear from. And then get feedback after the fact too, like, "Oh, it was so good to finally hear them interviewed," and that kind of thing. So it's grown and snowballed completely naturally and on its own, and somehow I think it's been almost 6 months now with an episode every week. So that's been
Wow,
pretty cool.
that's
Yeah,
good output.
right. Not too bad. We've had a few weeks where there was one week where we had 3 episodes because of the film fest and that sort of thing. So we're creating all kinds of content over here.
Now, I want to talk about the film festival in just a moment, but when we talk about trail running and the community behind or that's involved in trail running, it's wide, as in all over the world, but not necessarily big. Would you say that?
Absolutely. Still, I think because we get caught up in our world too, and sometimes you get in your own little echo chamber or whatever, it seems like it might be bigger than it is. But yeah, we're still a tiny little sport, which I think makes the community all the more fun. And maybe that's why we're so tight knit too, is because we know, and in the grand scheme of things, we're still this little thing. So let's stick together and be weird together.
I was just at the Diaz Vista run in Port Moody, and I ran into Jeff Pelche, who's probably to many people quite well known as not just a runner and a good runner, but a filmmaker as
Hmm.
well. And he created a film recently, I believe it was on the Moab, the 240, which
Hmm.
is an incredible run. And I think he finished second. I'm going from memory here. But when I was talking to Jeff, first of all, I want to mention that recently I was on CBC. They were looking for interviews to talk about Ihor Verhees and the Barkley Marathons, and they ended up settling on me. And I inadvertently mentioned that Jeff Pelche was the one behind one of the films on Barkley and Gary Robbins, and I actually meant The Ginger Runner. But I did confirm with Jeff that he was part of the film. I think he recorded an interview. But anyway, so I apologize to people who picked that one up and said, "Hey, you got it wrong." But anyway, Jeff and I were talking a bit about the trail running world. And for those people like yourself and him and others who are, we'll call you early adopters, you're in earlier in the sport than, bigger companies and others trying to come in and maybe try to make some money off it and trying to, I guess, cash in a little later in the game. It helps to be an early adopter, but that's not really what trail running is about, is it? I mean, there are people who are sponsored, but it really is about fostering and supporting community.
I think so. I think that's going to stick at the root of it. It's an exciting and interesting time in the sport because there is the growth potential, and I think we're going to see some of those bigger brands move into the space maybe a little bit more aggressively because there's money to be made, and that's how that works. And especially with more interest in the sport, even though it is small, it is growing, which is really exciting, obviously, for all of us. But I think. And this is my echo chamber as well too, and this is just me spewing out my own little bias and that kind of thing too. But I feel like there is an appetite for kind of that grassroots model where I don't know if big companies will be able to come into the space and bully their way in and just kind of be loud and abrasive and find success like that. I don't doubt that it'll work, but I think there's room for the early adopters, as you said, to continue to kind of push their message out and embrace the community that exists. And I don't think that community will forget who you are.
Yeah.
And whether that be a podcast, a film creator, a race series, like I think those strong kind of roots you can build, and if you stay true to the community won't forget, I don't think.
Yeah, and there's so many examples on social media where somebody is reviewing hotel rooms, for example, or Airbnbs, and they do a great job, and then all of a sudden they start adding in product placement, and it takes away from what it was originally intended to be. And I think in trail running, at the end of the day, for most people, if they're going to watch a podcast or listen to a podcast, watch a YouTube video, they don't really want a lot of that stuff. They just like in this case of what we're doing, we're just talking about podcasting. Like you said, it's our own little echo chamber, or excuse me, trail running. When there's ulterior motives, it starts to get irritating and people can see through that. But yeah, go ahead.
No, you're exactly right. Like people can see it's so easy to smell out BS now. As
You can
and
see
so
it.
right? And so why try and peddle it?
Yeah. Well, and I want to talk about, whenever I do these interviews, and I don't do a lot of them, I always think, what would people want? And when I'm training, and as you know, training for an ultra is the big part of it. The ultra is the final, the cherry on top, as
The
they say.
celebration.
And I don't tend to listen to a lot of running podcasts. I'm listening to podcasts about filmmaking and entertainment because that's what I'm really interested in. And I'm already running, so why would I? But then recently I grabbed a couple of your podcasts, and I got to say this, I really enjoyed them because I was literally out there for a long run, and I'm listening to all this, and it really resonated with me. But that's not always the case because if people are getting into like the details about business and all that stuff, it can get pretty tiring. People want to know how you're training, what you're doing for nutrition, what your motivation is, what's your story, what's your personal story. And that's what I felt when I listened to a couple of your podcasts in particular, that really, it made me want to listen more. It didn't make me want to go, I got to tune out and listen to Bob Marley instead, which is also a really nice way to run for training.
Yes, absolutely. We all got time to run to some Bob, but
So when you're hosting these, you keep them to what, 15 minutes ish?
yeah, we've gotten a little longer, probably I'd say 20 minutes ish now.
Yeah.
I try and give at least 15 minutes for the interview now, whereas before I tried to have the whole thing wrapped up in 15. But I think around 20 is kind of perfect, it
Are you
seems.
thinking about what the audience wants to hear? Or are you just trying to keep it focused on, I've got this guest and I need to ask them these questions?
I have an outline and I like to have one sort of focus because it's so short.
Hmm.
So if it's someone's race, let's talk about the race, but let's get to know them a little bit. And if we have a tangent that kind of comes up, like let's dive into that a little bit. I try to relax from the script and sort of let the conversation flow, but at the same time it's 20 minutes and we want to create that interest from people. So like, oh, I want to hear more and build that. So I do want to make sure that we get certain things across, but I also don't mind if we go off on a tangent and maybe you didn't learn as much as I had written down that we were going to, but the chat was probably a lot more fun.
Yeah. I listened to your podcast regarding the Trail Running Film Festival that you hosted, Community Trail Running, along with some friends of yours, hosted in Vancouver. And then you've got the Alberta runs as well. And I listened to your interview with
Matthias, yeah.
Matthias, super entertaining guy.
Yes.
But what was interesting about it is, and I used to work in television just like you did, so I know when I'm hearing interviews, I'm kind of listening to how someone's interviewing. And I was really listening to how you were interviewing because I know you're not an on-camera guy. You've become one in the last year, but you're a behind-the-scenes guy. But I thought you really kept Matthias on track, and it didn't become a promotional effort about the film festival. It became really his story for why. And I really enjoyed that. I thought it was a good track. And if I can jump off that for just a second, the other interview where you were talking about mental health, that's a tough one. And I thought you were able to just kind of take yourself out of it and just offer the opportunity for the guest to talk. And that's a tricky thing to do because you don't want to get in the way of something like that or say the wrong thing.
Yeah, absolutely. I try and, you know what, like the best podcasts are the ones, especially in my format, because it's not conversational, it's more about the guest. The
Mhm.
best ones are the ones when I don't say much. I've had interviews where I'll look at my watch and it's like 8 minutes in and I haven't got to my second question. I'm like, this is the best. Like these people just carry it. Like, and that's where I've tried to do that since the get-go, and I think that's probably from being behind the scenes to start with as well, as I'm not necessarily comfortable being up front anyway, but also it's always about the guests, so don't get in the way.
Yeah. The film festival, Trail Running Film Festival, is probably going to become one of the premier film festivals about trail running and running in general. Because again, early adopter, but they've got the right attitude. As the organizer mentioned, they've got some sponsors coming in, but it's not going to be one of these things where hosts like yourself, community hosts in different areas in North America, are going to all of a sudden get thrown a bunch of rules. It's still pretty grassroots.
Yeah, I hope they can give it that Wild West feeling that it still has, because that's sort of the fun part on our end, especially as the licensees all around the country too, mostly in the US, but a few more here in Canada. But just fun hearing about the different shows and the different communities that everyone has that they get to engage with, you know, and some people are putting the show on in a barn, because they live out in the sticks, and that's the closest area to for everyone to hang out is a barn where everyone can kind of come together and celebrate the community there. And you know, there's breweries, there's theaters, but it all works because we get to tap into these local communities. And here in Vancouver, like Janine and I, and of course my wife helped with a bunch of stuff too. But Janine and I have a good grasp and relationship with the local community here, so we kind of get to tap into that, and then we get to take the event and make it a celebration of our specific community too, right? It's not only is it these cool trail running films, but it'll be the Alberta groups as well. But here was, you know, it's the Vancouver trail running community coming together, celebrating the sport, everyone hanging out and socializing. A quick tangent on that: I have a friend from work who moved here from Montreal like a year ago. He's gotten into trail running just a little bit here and there, dabbled, but he came to the event 2 years ago to volunteer, and this year he came to watch. And he said, "I've never been in a room that felt like such family, knowing that it was just everyone was there for a sport." He was just completely blown away by the
Wow.
community vibe. Yeah, and I just thought, like, I wish I was recording him because I could have just ran that as our ad next year. It was so funny. Like he was just so touched by the event. But that's what it is. The community, as you had mentioned earlier, is small and tight knit, and but still welcoming and always kind of ready to celebrate what we are, and also poke holes at it, and realize that it's not perfect, and if we want it to continue to grow, we have to poke holes in it to make it bigger. And I think the celebration goes through the film festival really well, because I think the film fest chooses good films to make us look at the sport in a way that's not just about running fast.
That's a good point. I would like to think that, excuse me, or I believe that trail running events, ultra marathons, are different than a marathon or traditional running on the road, in the sense that it isn't always about the time. It's about, you know, you've got a course with, let's say, 400 people on it, and a lot of them are like me or even newer to running, and it's not about the time for us. So, you know, for me, I want to get a good time, but I want to finish this race. And if I finish that race, that's my victory. For a marathon, it really is more, and this is not a knock on marathons by any way, by any
Mm-mm.
means, or some of the other runs on the road. It's really more about, you're really setting that time. You know that the 3:30 marathon, if you can do that, or even better, it is. I think trail running, there's that top group for sure, always trying to get the time, always trying to get the podium, and that's okay. But they're really mixed in with a bunch of others. I guess, you know, the same could be said with marathons too, right? For a lot of people, it's, wow, you finished it, that's great. Anyway, that was a bit of a tangent with no point. Um, when I tell people what I've done, like this, when I did this recent Diaz Vista, one of the, common question every single time, probably every trail runner gets it: why? Why would you do that? Somebody asked me today if I was being chased, and I said, yeah, by the law, and a bear too. But it is kind of hard to explain that, the why. And I don't know if you want to give us your why when you sign up for something really difficult like Squamish 50/50, which you were able to complete
Well,
in
I
horrendous
will.
conditions.
Yes, absolutely, and I will. But I want to know what you said once you got past the joke. The joke. Why?
Yeah.
What's your why?
Well, recently I mentioned that interview on CBC where they wanted to talk to a trail runner about Ihor Verhes finishing and I hope I didn't mess up his last name, finishing the Barkley Marathons. He's from Canada, so he's our guy. And I laughed and I said, it's really difficult to explain, but my reasoning is, I'm not going to Everest. I don't want to climb Everest. It's not something that's on my list, for many reasons, but I do appreciate that, you set a goal to climb a mountain that's really difficult, and it's not approachable or attainable for a lot of people because of what's involved, the risks, the costs, and stuff like that. This is my Everest, but it is affordable, and it is an equalizer. Like, nobody's giving me the finish. They're not giving me stuff or equipment or anything. It's like, you either put in the time and train or you don't. But when you do put in the time and train and you complete it, there's a real sense of satisfaction. It's like this last race I did, the Diaz Vista. I just like, what am I doing? Halfway through, I'm like, this is insane. This is really difficult. I'm not questioning or wanting to quit, but it's like, do I really want to do long runs? I still have those, and then when I'm done, it's like, I can't wait to get to the next one. So
Sign up
it's a
again.
personal challenge.
Absolutely. And yeah, that hits the nail on the head because I was just gonna say, and you alluded to it as well, like you did the training and you either you did or you didn't, and the race will happen or it didn't.
Mhm.
But I think what I love about that, if you just strip it right down, is you can't bullshit yourself, especially. You can't BS anyone, right? Like when you get to the start line, you either did the work or you didn't.
Yeah.
And also you'll find out what you can do or you can't do, and it all kind of comes back to what, like how much work you wanted to put in the first place. My
Right.
why, this is sort of ramping up to it, but it's kind of changed, I think, since I've started running. Um, and now, yeah, it's just that sort of that personal exploration of trying to figure out what I can do, but also being out there is just so good for how I feel emotionally and physically that I don't need a race to keep getting that fulfillment, but the chance to push myself in a controlled environment with a clock and like other competitors and feel those vibes is just super fun.
Yeah.
Like you said, like you get halfway through the race and you're like, oh my God, what am I doing? And then you probably got to an aid station and heard some cowbells and got picked up. And then you probably felt like hell again. And then you made it to the finish line and you had your family or whoever. And it's like, what a great day. What a cool time out in the world when there's so much insane stuff going on. You got to spend a day making your way through the bush
Yeah.
and then you got to celebrate it.
With like-minded people.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's what I always notice. Again, I used to call myself middle of the pack, and I'm starting to realize I'm a little maybe past the middle a little bit, but that's okay. But when you're doing those out and backs, everyone, almost every one of them, the really competitive runners who are passing you, they take the time to say, good job, and you got this. And it's just such a nice thing because they don't need to do that. They're flying. They're on a mission.
They're
I
actually
saw
racing.
there. Yeah, that's right. I have to remind myself I am in a race. I'm not racing, but I saw Eric Bird, who is the organizer of the Fat Dog 120. And it was so funny because we were running by each other. He's, coming down the hill and going really fast. And we just kind of looked and we recognized each other. And he goes, Eric, I'm like, Eric. And it was just kind of a neat moment. And it's just like, good job. But I was going to ask you really quickly, what's neat, and I tried to explain this to somebody and I couldn't. When you finish a race like that, or even when you're in it, something's happening that you can't really explain, that you're showing yourself a new level of something that you can do that's really difficult. But in proving it to yourself and saying, I persevered through that and I pulled that off. And when you're done, you don't really, I can't really describe it. What that does to just, I think it does something to your brain that's kind of a positive little boom. And that's it. It's not a overarching, I've got the world, I can do anything, I can face. It's just more of just a little bump, I think. And it's kind of a neat mental thing that's hard to explain.
I completely agree, and I feel like to take it even further, it wasn't even so much like, oh my God, I did this super hard thing, which is awesome and totally, but it also like the simplicity of just training and then doing it and then actually achieving it was like, oh, like this was awesome and a super cool goal, but anyone can do it. I believe anyone can be a superhero. Like if you have 6 months to dedicate to doing it, you can do it. You might not want to, totally fine. But if you do want to and you dedicate, like I'm convinced anyone can do anything now because of the long runs. Because it's just like all you need to do is put in the work. And I know that sounds ridiculous, but like if you put in the work and you have the time, you can go accomplish insane things. And we see it in this sport, especially all the time.
Yeah. And having said that, what's interesting about that is the key is if you want to do it. A lot of people don't see the enjoyment. Like I like snowshoeing, and people say, "Oh, that's like hard walking."
Yeah,
They don't
yeah,
see the
yeah,
fun.
yeah.
So that's fine. But if you want to do it, I've heard people say, I couldn't do that. And I always think to myself, I bet you, if you wanted to, you could. But having said that, there are people who have physical limitations. They've got a knee issue. They'd love to get out there and do this, but they can't. They've got an IT band issue. They've got, bad knees or things that prevent them from doing it. And they're standing on the sidelines saying, good for you, because if I could do it, I would, but my body won't allow me to. So I always think in terms of don't take it for granted. It's amazing that we get that opportunity and can do it. But yeah, you're right. If somebody really wants to do it, if you set your mind to it, for sure.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. It's a beautiful
Um,
thing.
Before we run out of time, I wanted to ask you about the Barkley Marathons. Anybody watching this probably knows what that is. It's got a long history, 20 finishers now in the whole history of this race, which is amazing. This past year in 2024, Ihor Verhees won his first time out. It's amazing. A great guy, just a nice person. All the people who finished it were just nice people. But Jasmine Paris became the first woman to finish this race and got international attention all over the
Yes.
world. BBC. They were covering her story. And I thought to myself, well, that's interesting because this is our little sport still, right? We think of it that way. What do you think it does for trail running and for that race to have that kind of attention focused on it?
I think first and foremost, amazing. Yeah, amazing job by Jasmine and Ihor. And a quick little side tangent. I'm going on the Trail Trash podcast. It's called. It's some guys from in the southern states that have a trail running podcast, and they did their review on the Barkley, and they're going nuts about Jasmine for like the first 20 minutes of the podcast. And of course, in Canada, we have a little bit different lens with Ehor finishing it, right? So I'm waiting for them to get to them. And they're like, okay, so there was these other finishers, and they go blah 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 Ehor blah blah blah. I was like, no, that's the only mention he's getting on this show, but rightfully so. I mean, it's an incredible accomplishment by Jasmine. I don't necessarily know if it, like pushes trail running into the mainstream or anything like that more, or grows the sport more, only because the Barkley is so weird. It's not really trail running, like it's its own kind of like it could be on Mars. Like it's kind of its own weird thing.
It should be on Mars. That's where they're
Right?
going next.
Yeah,
So
exactly.
hard.
Like Laz is kind of doing his own weird thing with all of that. So I don't think it's like a bad thing by any means, but I don't think like and especially your background and being in news and this blowing up, like I don't think there's a news meeting sitting around this week where people are going, "What's going on in the local trail running scene now that we saw Jasmine finish?" You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I don't know if that's happening, but for a woman to put her foot down and finish that race is just awesome because they did it. Like a woman did it, and now they can't say that that hasn't happened. So it's fantastic for the sport and for showing that women kick just as much ass. But I don't know if it's going to like grow trail running
Yeah.
because it's in the mainstream now or anything like that. I think it was a fantastic accomplishment, great to shine the spotlight on her. But I wonder if it's more like the carnival sideshow as opposed to like this legitimate sport. I don't mean her accomplishment. I mean the Barkley in itself.
What shirt is that you've got on there?
Oh, it's a Squamish 50. You've got the X. That was the year after. This is the 9.
That was the year I didn't do the 50-50. I did the 50. But this
Right.
year, this year, I'm going to do it. I'm going to do the 50.
Yes, you are.
I'm
Heck
going to make
yeah.
it happen. So let's end on this. When you see something like the Barkley Marathons, excuse me, it's really difficult to explain how hard it would be to do what those racers do. 60 hours, 5 loops or laps, really difficult conditions, and you have to route find to
Yeah. Yeah.
that's tough. And it's amazing for anyone who, even gets a fun run, which is 3 laps. But
Right.
you can't really explain to somebody how difficult that is.
No, and again, like it's Laz's House of Horrors, right? Like every time someone finishes it, he makes it harder. Like it's not even you can't even get intel from someone the year
Yeah.
before because it's useless the year after. So it's just like, yeah, it's such a strange event in such a difficult place. I don't know the area. I've never been on the ground there, but just hearing the stories and seeing the photos of these people when they come out of the bush, just like
Yeah.
covered in like in scrapes and bruising, and you're just like, it not only is it 60 hours out there, it's 60 ridiculously hard hours.
Yeah, it
And
is.
Ihor crushed everyone.
Oh,
He finished what, 55 hours and change? I think under 56. I can't remember. It's been a little while now. But everyone else was against the 60-hour cutoff, if I recall.
well,
Like
yeah,
he
he had like an hour 15 left. Yeah, it's unbelievable. I've got a request in, I think, as you do, to interview Ihor. So he'll be on this channel soon. Have you talked to him
excellent.
yet?
I have not. I have not. But it's so good that he's chatted with so many
Yeah,
folks.
he's a popular
And
guy.
yeah, good
But
spotlight.
I saw Gary Robbins' interview with him, and I've seen a few others. And I don't want to go through blow by blow what happened at the Barkley, but I want to try and get inside of his mind. Like, when people say, "Oh yeah, it was really difficult." No, 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 no. Let's explore what that looks like. Climbing up the hill, it's dark and I fell. That kind of. Let's get into the specifics of how horrible it was. But anyway, I want to ask you, let's end on trail running. People always look for tips. They want like, what's the nutrition that you're using when you're training versus a run? And, how do you prepare and those kinds of things. Do you have any tips for people that you found over the last little while that might help, or some of these conversations you're having with people that could help them in their training to get ready for a long run, like a race?
Yeah, totally. Nutrition wise, you mean,
Yeah.
right? Yeah. First, I'm not a nutritionist or anything like that, so take it all with a grain of salt. That's only what I've learned through running and through my coaching and that kind of thing. But like, and it's boring because it's going to be the same answer I think I've probably given in the past, but you just need to practice. Take a bunch of different
Yeah.
things out there, see what works with you. My coach, the only thing that we did was 200 calories an hour. As long as I'm hitting that, they didn't care about carbs or this or that. It was just
Hmm.
make sure you get 200 calories in. So I've done everything
During your
from
training, you were doing that 200.
yes, yeah. As soon as any run that was 2 hours or longer, I would eat on, and I would eat 30 minutes into the run is when I would start, and then it
Okay.
was just taking in 200 calories an hour. And I've done everything from like the gels and bars that you would buy and get at any other run to I figured out that I like regular whole foods more. So I was like bagels with cream cheese is
Mm.
something that I really like out there.
Mm.
Um, Ham and cheese croissant is another thing that I like. If I'm really dirt bagging it up on the way to a group run, I'll hit like the McDonald's drive-through and I'll bring like sausage and egg McMuffins or whatever. Like, oh, I'm a sucker for any of that kind of stuff.
Wow.
Uh, before like the waffles or the gels or that kind of thing.
Yeah.
I have started. Full disclosure, I'm a Knack Squad ambassador now because I do like Knack, and they have these like they're like applesauce, like baby food
I
almost.
had one at
Yeah.
Diaz Vista.
Okay. And so I'm wondering because basically the first time I had it, I was like, oh, and then I had it again, I was like, oh, and then I had once more, I was like, okay, and then after that, I was like, no, you know what, this works for me, and I didn't. I've had no issues like gut wise or with that. So I'm wondering, how was the taste to you when you had it at first?
Honestly, and no offense to knack, and that's a I hadn't really been around knack, so I didn't really know about it, and
Yeah.
it looked like something you'd give the baby, like the baby food
Yeah.
thing. So right away I was a little weirded out by that, but I found the consistency kind of threw me, and it was late in the race, and I did exactly what you're not supposed to do, is I didn't train with it, and here they got a free knack thing, I'll try knack. So
Yeah.
I was exactly like what you said. That but I didn't get past the first one, and I didn't really need it at that point. I was kind of, I wouldn't say, shouldn't say I didn't need it. I'd already fueled up it, and that this was just a bit of an extra thing.
Yep.
But now that you told me that, I'm going to try that. I'm going to get some and try in training, because I think it's really important when you're going to a race and that's what they're serving. You have the option of just bringing a bunch of your own stuff, or get prepared and try what they've got. And all of those are really good. Like, they're when you look at the ingredients, it's stuff you could actually eat and feel good about.
Yes,
I
that's it.
think the problem is when you get longer in a race, you just don't want to do anything. I don't want gels. I just start getting sick of stuff like that, and that's when
Yep.
it'd be great to have like a peanut butter sandwich. So
Yes,
there's not available,
totally.
and I tend to pack heavy, which I shouldn't do. And I look at the runners who are up at the top. Most of them have as little as possible. So let's end on that then. What about water and having even a water with electrolytes in it and just regular water? If you're in a race, are you taking the bare minimum and just forcing yourself through to the next aid station and kind of planning that out, as opposed to having extra and a little extra weight?
I think I'm probably closer to you than the front of the pack. I think front of the pack too, like those are people that have everything dialed in, right? They've got crew waiting for them too. They know exactly what they want at those weights, where we're kind of maybe more feeling out what we're trying to do in the sport still
Yeah.
and still figuring out our nutrition and that kind of thing. So I don't mind having a little bit more on me if it means more variety because
Yeah.
it gets harder to eat. Like you said, it's like, okay, well, maybe I have a fucking chocolate, I have a chocolate bar in my backpack or something, so I can get into that. Or banana bread's another one that I like.
That's a good one. But then,
Banana.
carrying it, how do you make it not become this squashed little sweaty piece of
Well,
mud?
and then so that's, I guess, the other thing with trail running is like if it just becomes a squash thing, you just deal with it, right? Yeah,
That could be the end of you right there. It's all good until I started puking up my
yeah,
banana bread.
yeah. Oh, yeah. You don't want to do that.
Yeah,
Um,
so I told you I'm doing the Squamish 50/50, and that's I tend to just I look at these things as like a survival thing. I'm gonna get through this whole thing. I'm not gonna have a drop bag or anything. And I can do that, but maybe this time I'll have the drop bag for the 50 kilometer race, or the 50-mile race, 80 kilometers, and have some lovely peanut butter sandwich or something waiting for me. I think
yes,
that would be nice. And hopefully
a
the bears
hundred
don't get it.
percent. Yeah, no, exactly, right? Or like a piece of bacon. Like leave yourself like a little treat
Ooh,
or something as well, right? Like
I like that
something,
idea. That's a
yeah,
really good idea.
you can look forward to
Pieces of
that.
bacon, maybe. But
Yes,
I got to train with it though.
yes, don't forget to train with it
Yeah.
for sure. That 50/50 too, make sure you get I always when I started doing training, and not to tell you what to do, but just because the back-to-back days, the visual I have is make sure you're running through the finish line and not to the finish line. So make sure you're fueled and stocked as
Mm,
though you could keep going because it's just an aid station. The end of day one is
mhm.
just an aid station. You
And
just
then
get
some
to
sleep.
sleep.
Yeah.
Yep,
Okay.
yep.
I'll mark that down. What are you training for the rest of 2024?
I'm pretty excited for the year. I don't have anything too crazy, but in June, I'm going to do the longest day gross grind challenge. I've always wanted to try
Oh,
that.
when's that?
I think it's the 22nd this year
Of,
because of June.
oh, okay. Yes, I think you're right.
Because yeah, because Leap Day moved it, right? Usually it's 21st, but I think
Yeah.
it, or maybe it's the 20th. Either way, it's that week there. So they open, you get to start at 4 a.m. and they keep it open till 10 and they
And you just,
download you and you just climb as many times as you
oh,
can.
and is it already full to sign up for that?
No, they haven't even opened it yet.
Oh,
I'm used
okay.
to, yeah, 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 yeah,
I saw that a
totally.
while ago. That to me, that interests me because talk about a personal challenge. You're not going against
Yes.
anybody else. It's like the backyard runs. You just go until
And
you can't
it's
go anymore.
exactly, and it's for search and rescue the money goes
Yeah,
to. So it's
excellent.
like a totally like fun challenge. I'm looking forward to doing that. And then in July, we have the film festival going on in Alberta. So some races there have obviously leaped off the map to me, and I'm doing a relay called the Sinister Seven, which is in Crowsnest Pass. And I'm running leg six, which looks like a total sufferfest. It's like the highest and most climbing, and I'll likely be running overnight, so that'll
Wow.
be interesting. Yeah, but it's super cool. We have 7 people on our team. I've only met one of them, so gonna hang out with some new friends and conquer 100 miles together, hopefully.
Wow.
Yeah, which would be pretty cool. And just after that is Buck in Hell, and I'm doing that as part of a relay as well. So I have two relay races this year. I did Buck in Hell 2 years ago with a different partner, and every time I do a relay, I enjoy it more because you get to challenge yourself still, but the cheering on and crewing your friends is like it's so fun. It just makes it so much more engaging. You get to see Buck in Hell's fun because it's just 2 people. One person runs down the mountain, person runs up. So you, what either way you do it, you get to see everyone on the course, and then you get to see them all at the aid stations when your partner's running. So it's just fun to take. It's you get to take in the whole course throughout the day in a totally different way. So I'm really looking forward to that.
Awesome.
And then yeah, totally. And then in August, I'm heading down to Washington again for the Beast of Big Creek, which is at Mount Eleanor, and it's 14 miles or something like that. I think it's like 23K, but it's super fun because you basically run from the group campsite, which they get the whole race gets the whole group area, so they just cordon it
Oh,
off. Everyone can come camp for free if they want when they sign up. They just have to put in for the site. We stay at a hotel down the road, but it's still super fun to come in there and see everyone just there for the race. And then you run from the campsite onto the local trails, and that takes you up to the top of Mount Eleanor, which is I think it's like about 11K from the start and then
hmm.
11K back, and you're just basically up and then down, and it's really fun. It's then like 360-degree views from the top of Mount Eleanor. It's insane. That's in the
Awesome.
Olympic National
Is it
Park. Yeah.
Eleanor or Elsinore? It's Eleanor?
I think it's Eleanor.
Okay. Just I throw
Yes.
that out there.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for joining me. I really appreciate it. And social media has the moments where people will comment on things, and anybody has anything negative to say about this, keep it to yourself.
Yeah,
I
that's
don't
right.
want
We
to
don't
hear
want to
it.
hear
I don't want to hear it.
it.
I do appreciate your time. I really want to congratulate you on 90 episodes of your podcast, Community Trail Running. I think it's really exemplary that you've managed to pull that off, because it isn't an easy thing to do. But I think you're just like with trail running. I think you've just become attached to that now. It's so much fun and you enjoy it, even though it's a lot of work. And I just think it's great that you're doing that. You're bringing the community together too, which is really neat. And as you said, giving some exposure to people that their local community might not know or know about, but we might not know about. So I think that's really neat. And they all have great stories too. So where can we find your podcast?
Thanks so much, Eric. Yeah, it's super fun. It's just communitytrailrunning.com, and you can find me on all the socials, Community Trail Running as well.
All right, and we'll find you on a trail somewhere on the West Coast. And I'm here in the Okanagan in a place called Summerland, BC. And my training up here had nothing to do with what I did at the Diaz Vista, but I don't think it matters. Running is running. So anyway, thanks a lot, Adam, and we'll catch up to you soon.
Thank you, Eric.
Gonna stop recording.
It'll,
That was fun. Thanks, buddy.
thank
I
you.
enjoyed that.
Yeah.
I don't know where we stopped the record. Oh, there it is. Dunk.